Dr. Michelle Maidenberg. How are you?
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. Thank you for taking the time. I know you must have a busy schedule.
Don't we all?
Yeah, don't we all? That's the thing.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So you coming to us from New York City, the Big Apple.
Yes. Yeah. It's where all the
And
action
I'll,
happens, right?
yeah, so I've been told. So how long have you been in New York?
My whole life. Never left.
Oh,
I've traveled out of New York, but I lived here my whole life. Yeah. It's a
yeah.
great place to live and visit. But every place has its issues, I would say. Right?
Look at the world today. Look at the
Yeah.
world today. You're correct
Yeah.
in what you're saying. Each world, each country has its issues.
Yes,
And
exactly.
hopefully, as you know, we can all get to some common ground as humans, and just
Exactly.
look peacefully with each other. Like it's so hard. like,
That is because we have egos and we have narratives and we have yeah, attachments and
greed.
expectations and a whole bunch of different things that impact that.
Yeah, greed,
Yeah,
politicians, as you said, it is what it is.
exactly.
So, would you prefer I call you Michelle or Dr. Michelle? Which
Whatever
one
you
works for
prefer. I'm
you?
open. I'm open.
Okay, Michelle, so you are a doctor, you're an entrepreneur with your own practice, you're a co-founder of your own nonprofit, you're a teacher, you're a successful author, you're a TEDx speaker. Sorry, not you're a TEDx speaker. I actually watched your video today. I'm a TEDx fan. We'll get to that a bit later on.
Yeah.
So you've done it all. But let's start off with behind the scenes of Michelle before it all started, before the limelight, before the books, before the stages, before the doctor, before you found your purpose in life. Where did it all start for you?
So I didn't realize it till actually pretty recently, because I really thought about like why did I go into this, chosen profession and why is this meaningful to me? And I think it really did all start, I have a lot of intergenerational trauma in my life, unfortunately. And my four grandparents were all Holocaust survivors.
Oh,
Most of their families were murdered, in gas chambers, and they went to concentration camps themselves. They were originally from Czechoslovakia. Yes. So I heard stories literally from when I was tiny about the atrocities of the war and what they went through. And I think, I'm an empath by nature. I feel feelings on a really deep level. And, when somebody's going through any kind of adversity, I literally feel their feelings, in my body. And I think when I was younger, especially one grandmother particularly, she was very, very expressive and she would tell story after story. And for as long as I can remember, I must have been like really little, and I wonder how I processed it all, what came up for me and what I processed, because you never know, right? What goes on when you're such a young child, how you're developmentally, how you're processing things. And I think naturally because of, my parents married really young, they divorced when I was really young. There was a lot of, chaos, I would say, and adversity growing up. Um, I naturally became a healer, I think, just because of the position I was in. I was the eldest child. I was pseudo mature. It's definitely like an old soul. I always was the person who like helped people and would listen to people and give advice and offer feedback. And so it just kind of naturally came to me. I didn't know anybody in my profession. I didn't have anybody in my family. I didn't have anybody to go to and ask questions or like find out more about it. I just found my own way, you know?
yeah. Well, given what you have just said, now I understand why you chose the profession you did. I mean, that was going to be one of my questions. Why this profession? But I mean,
Yeah.
you summed it up for us. I mean, wow. I mean, divorce alone, especially when you're at a young age, can cause a lot of trauma for a
Yeah.
child. I mean, my parents, they got divorced, but I mean, I was in my 20s by then.
Okay.
So you can still handle it, and
Yes.
process it faster. But at a
Yeah.
younger age, it's not so easy, for
Yeah.
kids.
I
For
I
me,
I was 3 years old when my parents divorced.
Wow.
So it's really, yeah. That, and again, there was a lot went along with that, right? It's not just the divorce, but there was a lot that went along with that. A lot.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how young you are. I mean, even at 3 years old, the trauma will, stay with you throughout your life. Would you say, in your personal capacity, that you've overcome that trauma now when you look at your life?
Well, that's a good question because I think there may be a different way of looking at it because I don't think we overcome things. I think we integrate things. So, in other words, right, we have, just because one of my specialties is in trauma, we have our neural pathways in our brain, right, that kind of form the way we think about things, the way we behave, and it also informs, what how we react, in a lot of different ways. So I think that, we're essentially because of our histories and even in terms of physiologically, right, our neurobiology and, in terms of what's our adaptations and our coping skills and all the things, right, because we're wired for survival. Our brains are wired to avoid threat and discomfort. So the way the adaptations, the survival mechanism, by which you, let's say, acclimate to as you're growing older is different from person to person based on their experiences. So for me, I know like I repressed my feelings, I suppressed, a lot. Often the feeling that I habituate to or the feeling that is very comfortable and familiar to me is anger and frustration, so that's in my brain. The way that I kind of worked through my sadness and disappointment was through anger and frustration and rage. So whether that was, um, saying something aggressive in my mind towards somebody that I thought was hurtful to me or whatever the case is, that's what made me feel, more in control. That's what made me feel like I had, sovereignty over my feelings and over, people impacting me, negatively impacting me. Again, I was little, so that's not authentic, right? When you get angry and frustrated and have mean thoughts or whatever the case is, it feels strong and it feels a lot stronger than being sad, or feeling like a victim or whatever the case is, but it's not really an authentic sense of strength. And as you get older, it doesn't work anymore because if you're walking around angry, right, that could be very alienating and off-putting to other people. So you have to
Yeah.
learn new coping skills and coping mechanisms, right? So it's not really getting over it. Now I have better ways of coping. I have more adaptive, functional, healthy ways of interacting. When the trigger comes up for me and I go directly into default into that space because it's natural for me, I'm able to catch it and I'm able to say, whoa, like there's my child self, like I need to come back to my adult self. So it's an integration, not necessarily, we could change our neural pathways because I have changed my neural pathways by meditating, mindfulness, changing my behavior, working on it. But instinctively, those triggers are going to still come up at times. It just does, I can't help it.
I was just about to say, you must have triggers.
Yeah.
There's definitely triggers for all of us. That will
Yeah.
trigger something, that's
Yes.
related to our past. What's so interesting about what you just said, I've had plenty medical experts come onto the show. And, each one has a different opinion about how to handle this,
Yep.
Others will say, okay, the complete opposite of what
Mhm.
you saying, but there's different techniques on how we all handle this.
Yes.
What are your specific techniques like now with your practice and your patients?
Yeah. So with my TED Talk, which
Jumping to America.
yeah. So you heard my TED Talk, which is circumventing emotional avoidance.
Yeah.
Because of the way our brain is wired, right? We have the propensity, right, to avoid, distract from, rationalize our thoughts and feelings. It's naturally what we do because it's so painful. And we want to avoid pain of any kind, whether it's
Yeah,
somatically in our bodies. Yeah, we want to push it away. We want nothing to do with it. And we also we end up having thoughts about our thoughts. We end up having feelings about our feelings. We end up having thoughts about our feelings and feelings about our thoughts. So it's not just like the thoughts and feelings that come up, but then we add layers and layers to it on top of it. And then we may feel guilty about having a thought, or we may feel shameful about having a thought, or we may identify with it in a way that we actually judge ourselves. Like, I'm a mean person because I have a mean thought. There's so many layers on top of it. Or I should be stronger and I shouldn't have like an anxious reaction to that. We're constantly criticizing ourselves. We're constantly judging ourselves. We're constantly shitting ourselves. So the way that I teach is really kind of identifying what it is, not necessarily shying away from it, because it really does connect us to who we are at our core and our values, which are fundamental. Yeah, and it's fundamentally important to know about our values so that we act and behave in a way that's actually in line with our best self. Right? So we don't want to instinctively react from our thoughts and feelings, because that doesn't necessarily dictate, right, a healthy, helpful way to act. Because our thoughts could be aggressive, they could be irrational, we can control our thoughts and feelings. The only thing we can control is our behavior. And when you learn to lean into your emotions, and when you learn the utility of your emotions and the benefit of them, and you learn that that represents who you are as a person, that's a whole different way of looking at it. That opens you up to different behaviors, and behaviors that lead to confidence building and lead to actually changing the structure of your brain to be more functional and helpful. Because whatever we put energy and effort into grows stronger. If we put energy into our anger, the anger goes stronger. If we put energy into distancing, we distance more. That's just the way it is. So it's really taking, it's kind of noticing, accepting, and part of my book that I wrote is called Ace Your Life. And that's predicated under acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. So that's what I teach people. How do we get to a place where we're self-accepting, right? Where we're self-compassionate, and then we're self-empowering? Because that's how I see living a very functional, helpful life.
Yeah. And if you had to compare how you treat patients versus a normal standard therapist,
Yes.
there has to be a huge difference in how they go about it. You seem to go more to the root of the issue and accepting it for what it is, where they're, at the top.
At the change level, I'd like to think so. I try. I think the relationship is so important. I really try to connect with my patients, and really, really model for them their sense of worthiness and acceptance of who they are, because I truly feel very warm and loving toward them, in terms of their humanness. And sometimes they'll say to me, which breaks my heart, I have to tell you, they'll say, nobody ever said that to me. Or, no one ever showed such kindness to me, or when I say something to them about like their strengths or something complimentary, they'll get very uncomfortable, because we're not used to somebody being so direct with our feelings, right? Like, so I'll say to them, wow, like what you just said to me brought on such loving feelings, because it really touched my heart and was so meaningful to hear from you. And they're like, what? Who just said that? It's a little, and I know when people say that to me, I get a little uncomfortable, right? Like, whoa,
Yeah.
So I try to be very authentic and very genuine in my work. And I also, everybody, like you spoke about the world and what's going on, and everybody's reactions to them. It's like, we could be in a different country, but we all are human. Like we all bleed the same, all, we just have different constructs, but humans all do the same thing. They are wired for survival. I don't care what continent you're on. We're all wired to avoid discomfort and danger. Period. Full stop.
We just want to be in our comfort, safe zone all the time.
Wow. Yeah.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. Like, for me, my personal opinion, okay, is going to a, normal psychiatrist or therapist they don't really put themselves like in your shoes, whereas you coming from trauma yourself, it's so easier to put yourself in their position and actually relate to them and care for them because you know what it feels like yourself.
Yeah,
And that's so important. It's so important to heal someone.
I think so. But of course, I can't have every experience that every client has. Because could you imagine? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, right. So if I don't understand it, and by the way, you could go through a similar experience and still have a very different perspective about it. Right? Because we're each different. We're each different. We're different in terms of how we're wired, in terms of our perceptions, in terms of our genetics, in terms of 1,001 things. So even though we went through, like, let's say, right, you like, if somebody else's parents divorced when they were 3, I don't know, they might have had a very different experience of that. My parents, unfortunately, there was a lot of fighting and, it's tumultuous and etc. Some parents, right, like have a very amicable relationship. That's going to be a different experience for that child than it was for me. So even though we went through the same thing, we didn't go through the same thing because we're different and our temperaments are different. Our personalities are different. Again, culture, race, religion, culture, like could be so different too. So I think I really try to treat each person as an individual. And if I don't know something, like I ask, I want to understand them better, so I want to hear it from them. I want them to share with me what their experience is. That's so important to me.
Yeah. And it also depends, like on what type of parents you actually have. You
Yeah.
know, I recall so many instances like in my life, in my teenage years, when I would behave in a certain way. And that was
Uh-huh.
because of the trauma growing up. As you mentioned, when parents are fighting or families fighting, whether it be emotional abuse, whether it be, sorry,
That's okay.
whether it be physical abuse, that sticks with you.
Of
So when
course.
you grow up, you behave in a certain way. So, for example, if I grew up and there was a lot of violence within my family, now I'm in my teenage years and I'm always getting into fight. I find it so funny when your parents ask the question, "Oh, why are you like that? Why are you fighting?" You know,
Yeah.
you know, and I can't answer the question in that present moment in time. But now, like, when I chat to individuals such as yourself, parents also need to take accountabilities because of the environment that we actually grew up in.
Absolutely. Yes.
Mhm.
I mean, listen, my parents, right, were raised by traumatized people, right? Like they were like literally taken out of their homes when they were teenagers, like, right, dragged out of their homes and put in concentration camps, and they were starving and, etc. I mean, what went on, right? People went into gas chambers and died. Their whole family members died. They saw their families members dying. So like what's going to come from being raised by parents like that? Of course, there's going to be intergenerational trauma. So my parents, and I'll give you a good example. My paternal grandparents, they never said "I love you" to their children. They couldn't, for whatever reason, right? Because of the trauma, they couldn't express "I love you." That was really hard for them. When I was a teenager, my aunt used to always complain, "Oh, my mom never says I love you." My dad, used to say, "Oh, I know they love me. They don't have to tell it to me. It's okay." So one day I was a teenager and I was in high school and I said to myself, okay, my grandmother's traumatized. She can't say I love you. It really bothers my aunt. I'm going to do this experiment and I'm going to say I love you to my grandmother and see what happens. Maybe if I say it, maybe she'll respond to me. I don't know, right? So I decided to do that. I said I love you and I want you to know she died when she was 100. Every day after that, I heard I love you from her. She said I love you and I said I love you to her all the time. Because for whatever reason, she was blocked and she couldn't say it. And that was too vulnerable for her. But I opened the door and I was blessed with having the benefit of hearing that from her. So sometimes it's right. It's just like taking the time and effort to open somebody up, right? And being vulnerable with them that allows them to be vulnerable with themselves and others. And that's the work that I do too, right? It's really putting yourself out there. So, again, with families, like you said, there's a lot going on for, it's a matter of really understanding it and working with it and, really taking time and effort, to make changes.
Yeah. If you never experience love, how can you show it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, logic. And as you said,
Yes.
now it's generational because, I mean, grandparent to parent and then to you. I recall once because of family trauma, I actually told my mother, I feel that you should actually go see a therapist.
Mhm.
But, at that age, they
Yeah.
refuse.
Yeah.
They feel they're going to get admitted into a psychic ward. They're going to be seen as crazy. But it's not the
Yeah.
case. It's not the case. No matter how old you are, it's never too late to actually face that trauma. Stop
Well,
avoiding it.
easier said than done.
Yeah.
Because of what I said before, right? We're wired to avoid danger and discomfort. So discomfort comes in all different kinds of forms, right? Discomfort comes from like in our bodies and it comes also emotionally, right? So you're essentially asking your mother to lean into her negative emotions and to feel the feelings and to be vulnerable. Most people are not open to that. It's too scary. Most people are so married, to their adaptations and to their coping skills that not even when I even mention it, like what would happen if you gave up your anxiety? I'll say that to like a patient and they'll look at me like, oh my gosh, I can't do that because then I won't be motivated to do anything. And I'm like, really? Do you really think if you scaled back a little bit and I told you, okay, don't study for your test. You don't need to study for it. You'll be fine. That you're not going to study? So they start laughing, right? I'm like, you still will, but you don't have to. We could lower the volume. It doesn't have to be so overwhelming and so overpowering that it's impairing your functioning, right? So
Yeah.
people get really scared. They get really scared because that's how they see themselves and that's how they've been functioning their whole life. And I'm asking them to give up something that actually benefited them, right? Scary.
Yeah, it is scary. It's scary. You mentioned the word anxiety. You've been labeled the anxiety lady. What's the history behind that?
Um, I get the anxious mind. Like I don't personally suffer with I shouldn't say that. There's all different types of anxiety, right? And it really has more to do with our thinking. So some people's mind overthink. Some people worry. Some people ruminate. Some people's minds races. There's all different things our minds do. So and then there's the more clinical definitions of anxiety, right? Like somebody who has obsessive compulsive disorder or somebody who has generalized anxiety disorder or whatever. So I know for myself, I don't really catastrophize or worry or, do that. I think sometimes my mind could definitely ruminate, and get stuck on something. That definitely happens sometimes. My mind races at times. So it does, variations of that. But I really get the anxious minds. Like I get it. I really get it. And what the anxious mind does typically is avoid. It avoids. It's like a master avoider. So
Yeah.
I really help people, and to ask somebody to lean into their feelings when they're so used to avoiding is really hard. And of course, they get really fearful. So they may want to make changes, but it's hard to do that. So I really help people incrementally, make the changes they want to so that there's like lifelong impacts. And listen, I'll give you a good example. Last night, I saw this kid. I saw him since he's in high school. Now he's working full time. He's like in finance and he's like living by, on his own in the city. I mean, I've seen him for a bunch of years, right? When I started seeing him, literally, he had such bad social anxiety. He did not have close friends. Such like again, fearful interactions with his peers. Um, Lacked huge confidence. I mean, we could go on and on. And
Low
now
self. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry.
Low self-esteem.
Yeah, very low confidence. Yeah, definitely. Oh my goodness. I spoke to him yesterday and he actually, disclosed to me that he's in a serious relationship. He's in a, this is his first real serious relationship. First of all, in terms of socially, oh my goodness, he's changed so much. He has like close friends. His confidence is like, oh my goodness. Like in the past, he was a little bit overweight. He never would follow through on working out and taking care of his health. He looks amazing. I mean, for years now, he works out regularly. He takes care of his health. His confidence is boosted. And now, because of all that, he's in a serious relationship, which is something he always wanted, right? So he's 25 now. He's 25, and I saw him since he's in high school. But if you saw him, I mean, from A to Z, it's like mind blowing where he's come. Literally mind blowing. But here's a kid like who doesn't hide from himself. Like we talk about very vulnerable subjects and we talk about his true core feelings about things, his fears, his frustrations, everything. He puts it out there. That's why he was able to make the change he was able to make. Yeah.
I want to spice this topic up a bit for the listeners. So, about just over a week ago, I had an author who was on the show who goes by the name Jake Rubin. You can search and you can listen to what he had to say about the topic of anxiety. And he wrote a book called Anxiety to Awakening. And he's a hypnotherapist. So his point of view is that anxiety is not real. If I had to sum it up in my opinion, okay? It's not real, it's an illusion. And his way of solving it is via hypnotherapy, going to the root of it all. And I'm still busy reading his book. And what I'm reading so far, does make so much sense to me. What we think, the material we consume, alcohol, what we overindulge in, all of those things. So his solution to it is that hypnotherapy has solved a lot of anxiety issues, especially with these patients.
Yep.
So I'm sitting here, I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, there's so many different avenues you can go down that's different. You and him are different to the traditional way of handling it, and I see it actually being beneficial for patients. It's innovative, compared to the narrative. Oh, you got depression. Oh, you got anxiety. Okay, go see a therapist. I had a guest on Tuesday. I actually had a laugh out loud moment, because I mean, at a young age, when you have anxiety and depression, and your parents get overwhelmed about it, but they want to help you, but they don't know how. And she was telling me that her parents took her to a regular GP, right? So they didn't know how to deal with it themselves. And I mean, you go to a regular GP, he's just going to open up a lucky packet on how to deal with this now, and gives her this medication, which actually escalated the depression, escalated the anxiety. So we really have to be careful when it comes to this topic, Don't listen to the narrative. Listen to such podcasts as this, listen to Michelle, what she has to say about it. Go onto her website, check out on social media, listen to her TEDx talk.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing about what you said before about, Jake's work. So I think with hypnotherapy, you're dealing with the deep subconscious and unconscious, and that's why it could be very effective, right? Because I think what we're kind of saying the same thing, right? Because what drives our behavior sometimes and what drives our emotions and our thinking has to do sometimes with parts of ourselves that are not healed. Right. And that's deep in our subconscious and unconscious. So I get to that as well in my work with people, but we get to it in a different way. That's all. Yeah. So like if you see like that light bar behind me, that's something called EMDR, which is a certain type of treatment that I do. Right. Which also gets very deep into the subconscious and the unconscious as well. But it's just a different type of mechanism. So sometimes we're kind of on autopilot and we automatically habituate, like I said, like our emotions are a habit, right? So we have to like really understand that and really rework those neural networks so that our functioning could be different. But like I said, it's pretty much essentially, when he said it's not real and it's an illusion, I think,
Well, that's my words. That's my
yeah.
words.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
But I
because
think
I get it.
I think what you mean by that is that it's something again that we get acclimated to, right? It's our brain. It's our brain reacting to something. And we need to kind of rewire that so that our behavior is different. So again, people go at it in a different way. I think people have to find the mechanism that works for them, and everybody's different. Yeah.
Yeah. And why I said it, in those words is because I was telling him a personal story in 2019. I was at the time, I also followed the narrative of what anxiety actually is. I went to see my GP, so I'm no better than, the parents that took my guess, you know, at that age. And I went to see my GP, who I was seeing for years, so I trusted him. I had faith in him and his opinion. And he told me, which I mentioned to Jake, that look, he said, look, given how ambitious you are and the goals and objectives you have for your life and how busy you are on a regular basis, you are always going to have anxiety, and all you can do is manage it. And Jake was like, no, 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 no. That is not true. And then when he started to elaborate on why it's not true, and as I'm getting deeper into his book, I'm really like realizing, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense. You
It
know?
does. Yeah. Because if you think about it, if you're rewiring your brain, you can you can like get to a point where you're not having the same reactions and you're not having the same interactions and you're not having the same behavior, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Just
you're
before we come out of the show, oh, sorry, no, you can finish.
no, I was just gonna say, like we're talking about which I really try to make people understand. We're talking about a physiological neurocognitive change.
Yeah.
That's like that's mind blowing. Like if you think about it, that we could rewire our brain.
The word itself is mind blowing.
It is, but it's so good to when I tell people that, right? When I tell people guys, you could try every method in the book, but where it's going to come from is within you, not because you're doing this or this or this or this. All the magic and the power is right here. All you need is
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't need a
Yeah.
pill of this or that or that or that. You need you.
Yeah. I was just saying, before I could come onto the show, I just finished off one more chapter in Jake's book. And in that chapter, just like about the mind and how busy the mind can actually get, worrying about the past, worrying about the future. As he said, the past is going to make you depressed, the future is going to bring on anxiety. But we can actually think about what's worked for us in our life and showing gratitude, which is so true as well. We keep worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen next week, instead of just being in the present,
Yes.
how many people would love to be, as he quotes in the book, in a safe place, have a warm bed to sleep in tonight, have food on the table. There's millions of people around the world that would love to be in our position,
Yeah.
but they're not. So if you just show gratitude for that and navigate the mind there,
Yeah.
it's a game changer. Really is again gratitude, such a game changer.
That's again, that's changing your mindset. It's changing your mindset, right? It's changing the narrative. It's changing the way you think. It's changing how you approach the world. It's changing. I mean, there's so many changes that happen just by that little switch, just by
Yeah,
that little
yeah,
switch.
yeah,
So, the world, again, there's so much that we could do. And there's so much change. And not even that, like just helping other people too, right? And giving of ourselves and having better relationships. All those things are amazing and they're at our fingertips. Like anybody could do that. It's just a matter of putting in the time, the effort, the energy, and the intentionality. Yeah. And I hope that I hope you'll read my book too. Just saying.
Yeah, yeah. There is your amount of books that's on a waiting list,
I have. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like.
Is your life. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So that's, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry, what did you say?
No, I said hopefully we'll get to it too.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
I want to get to all the books from all the authors that come onto the show. That, I really, really want to do. It's just like the podcast itself.
Talk about the book if you want me to.
Yeah, sure, no problem. That's, the type of relationships I want to build with all the guests that come onto the show. I like to keep it long term, not come on, meet each other, and then that's it, end of the story. I mean, it's just like the podcast, what I mentioned to, yes, I mean, if you look back on when you actually submitted your name, to be on the podcast, but we're only doing it now is because I'm the type of guy that, look, I will get to it. Sooner or later, I will get to it, That's the type of person I am. On your books, let's focus on your books. Let me give you an opportunity to promote your books. So the book you've just shown us is
Ace Your Life. It's called Ace Your Life. Yes, unleash your best self and live the life you want.
Okay, before I get to the other two books, let's talk about this book. Sum it up for the listeners. What can they expect? What can they get out of this?
It's a model where you're living your best life, and it's predicated under acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. And the book starts out by really talking about and explaining about the neuroscience and our neurocognition, because we really need to understand that, how we think. And then it talks about our values, and it gives kind of exercises to do to extrapolate and understand what your core values are. And then the 3 subsequent parts is what gets in the way of acceptance, compassion, and empowerment, and then how to integrate it into your life, acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. So it's a model for living. I teach it to people of all different ages. And I live by it myself. And it's been so extremely helpful. And I see that it really, really helps, people that I work with. They make like incredible changes in their life. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially the technical values, there's so many people out there in the world that don't even know what their values are.
They don't.
Even
Sometimes they think they do and they don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. And this is the second one.
This is the interesting one now. This is the interesting one because, Michelle, when I was a kid, I loved to eat. And I'm sure all kids out there in the world love to eat. How did this book come along?
So one of my specialties is in health and wellness. And it's called Free Your Child From Overeating, 53 Mind-Body Strategies for Lifelong Health. So I work on psychological barriers to health and fitness. I don't focus on nutrition, and because there's so many books on that. And, so this is really, so for me, it's not about people changing habits and integrating all these wonderful like skills and tools in order to be healthy, and more fit. The problem is that people can't maintain it or sustain it over time. That's the issue. Like when I do workshops and I ask people, how many of you have lost weight? Like, all the hands go up. And then I say to them, how many of you have maintained it over time? And the hands go down. So people have a hard time maintaining behaviors and habits. So that's what it really, it's like literally 53 strategies to help people more with the psychological part of it. And I'm an expert. I consider myself an expert on losing weight and gaining weight. I have 4 children. And over a period of 8 years, I gained 300 pounds in my pregnancies. And I was able to lose it and et cetera. And I've been working out and fit like for over 30 years. I used to be an aerobics instructor. So, and I work out about 6 days a week. And I really eat really clean. So I practice what I preach. Let's put it that way.
Nice. That's the type of authors we want. Yes. Practice what you preach. Yeah. Now, I was going to use the practical example when you mention maintain. It's like, you want healthy or you overweight. You sign up to go to the gym,
Yes.
and you have a great time for the first 2 weeks. And then after that, no more,
Yeah.
Then the
Right.
excuses start to come out. It's work, I'm busy, I'm tired, happens all the time.
It
Happens all the
does.
time.
The gym count on that because they get a big membership and then everybody like kind of falls away, right? That's what happens with most habits though. Like we get real gung ho in the beginning and like we put all of our energy into it and then we slowly peter out because we realize how much energy it takes and how much commitment, how much time. And also when you're working out, especially like with exercising, it takes time for your body, right? For your body to get used to new movements. And, sometimes you may be Charlie horse or you may feel like a little bit of like tension in your body. And people are like, I don't want to feel this way. This doesn't feel good. And they're like, forget this. But that's you avoiding the discomfort, right? We're constantly avoiding discomfort in all different kinds of ways. And that includes our habits too.
But you have to want it,
Yeah.
you have to want
Well,
whatever
you
that
ha-
goal is.
you have to have willingness. You have to have willingness to be uncomfortable. I always say that. That is really where it's at. You have to have willingness to be uncomfortable. Yeah.
Be comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yes, that's right.
Much of your life. I learned that a long time ago. Like so simple, but so impactful. You always have to be uncomfortable. That's how you grow.
That's
I'm thinking of the people who
we don't grow in our comfort. We grow in our discomfort. That's right.
100%. But people who also start businesses and then 1 month later they're like, this is not for me.
Yeah.
Your business is not going to boom, overnight or in 1 month. It can take years, but if you're passionate about it, it will grow. It will. Do you want to show us the books one more time on the screen?
Sure. So this is for Your Child From Overeating, and it's 53 mind-body strategies for lifelong health. Thank you. And then this one, it has a lot of squickies, but this is Ace Your Life, Unleash Your Best Self, and Live the Life You Want. And pretty cover. I love that cover.
Both covers are quite.
Yeah, those are the 2 books. I'm working on some other books, which I'm excited about. So we will have some down the pike, another 2, hopefully, coming down soon. Working on it. But I hope that people found this helpful, and I hope that you took away some golden nugget or something from it. And I'm always happy to be back on at any time.
Yeah, the profession that you are focused on is so critically needed, in this day and age. It honestly is.
Thank you.
The whole system is not working. Just by the way, I did your your exercise you did for today. Yeah. Open up. But for the listeners, I will share that link as well so people can check out your TEDx talk. Yeah, I'm sure they will definitely enjoy it. Michelle, thank you so much. Before we get going, once again, where can people find you online? Where you floating?
Well, my website is a really good place because it has all my blogs. It has all the information about me. I also blog for Psychology Today. I have a YouTube channel where I have guided meditations that I've recorded. And again, I've so many different articles that I've written on a variety of different topics, a lot of mindfulness based stuff. So check me out. Yeah. And I'm happy to always kind of communicate with you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Michelle. The show has been impactful, and I appreciate all that you're doing for humanity. Thank you so much. And enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Bye, Michelle.
Bye.